Most people believe that when something ends, the loudest voice wins. The final argument. The last message. The emotional goodbye. But real life doesn't work that way. Some endings don't explode, they echo. There is a kind of departure so quiet, so controlled, that it unsettles the people left behind far more than anger ever could. No accusations. No explanations. Just absence. And that absence stays. Not because you begged to be remembered. Not because you tried to hurt anyone. But because you left with calm. You didn't demand understanding. You didn't chase closure. You didn't collapse emotionally. You simply walked away, and let silence do what words never could. Tonight, we're going to talk about why that silence lingers. Why it creates regret. And why the strongest men don't need noise to be felt. Welcome to the channel, Stoic Love Wisdom. This is where lessons about love will help you better understand this complex emotion. In today's video, we will learn together about why does leaving in silence leave such a lasting impression on others. These are things that can change the way you perceive love and life. Be prepared because the secrets and insights you are about to discover may make you look back at yourself and the relationships around you. Before starting, find a quiet space, put on your headphones and relax. Let your mind completely immerse in these shares and enjoy every wonderful moment. Are you ready to discover new things about love? Let's start this journey with us right now. Part 1: Why silence hurts more than words ever could. There comes a point in every man's life when he realizes something painful but liberating. Not every departure needs an explanation. Not every ending deserves a final argument. And not every silence is weakness. In fact, the most powerful exits are often the quietest ones. I didn't learn this from books. I learned it from walking away. Without a scene, without blame, without begging, and watching how that silence echoed longer than any argument ever could. You see, people expect noise when something ends. They expect anger. They expect accusations. They expect one last emotional outburst to confirm that they mattered. Silence denies them that comfort. And that's precisely why it lingers. The illusion of closure. Most people believe closure comes from explanations. From one last conversation. From saying everything that was left unsaid. But closure is often just an illusion we use to soothe our ego. When you explain yourself, you give the other person relief. You allow them to place your pain into a neat box. Oh, he left because of this. She was upset about that. It ended for a reason I can understand. And once they understand, they move on. Silence takes that luxury away. When you leave without explanation, the mind has nothing to grab onto. No clear story. No neat ending. Only unanswered questions. And unanswered questions are fertile ground for regret. Why the mind hates unfinished stories. The human mind is wired to seek resolution. It craves patterns, meaning, cause and effect. When something ends abruptly and quietly, the brain loops. Did I miss something? Was it my fault? What did I do wrong? What did he see that I didn't? Silence forces introspection. And introspection is uncomfortable, especially for someone who never expected to lose you. Words end arguments. Silence starts reflections. That's the first truth most people don't understand. Stoic power is emotional discipline. From a Stoic perspective, silence is not passive. It is disciplined restraint. It is the refusal to react emotionally in a moment that demands reaction. Anyone can argue. Anyone can explain. Anyone can lash out when they feel disrespected. But it takes strength to walk away calmly when your emotions are screaming for release. Silence says, I don't need to prove my pain. I don't need your validation. I value my inner peace more than being understood. And that message, unspoken, is deeply unsettling to those who underestimated you. Why silence reverses the power dynamic. When you chase closure, you give power away. You say, indirectly, I need you to understand me so I can heal. But when you leave in silence, the power shifts. Now they are the ones seeking understanding. Now they are the ones replaying conversations. Now they are the ones wondering if they misjudged your value. Silence removes you from the emotional battlefield. And absence is louder than presence when someone expected access to you. The difference between indifference and dignity. Let's be clear. Silent departure is not about punishing someone. It's not about manipulation or emotional games. It's about dignity. There's a difference between leaving because you want them to hurt and leaving because you refuse to betray yourself any longer. Stoic silence comes from self-respect, not revenge. When you've already communicated enough, when your boundaries were ignored, your value diminished, your presence taken for granted, words lose their purpose. At that point, silence is honesty. Why they remember you more when you don't explain. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said. When you leave quietly, you leave behind an emotional vacuum. No final fight to justify your absence. No dramatic goodbye to soften the loss. Just a sudden realization. He was here, and now he isn't. That absence becomes magnified over time. They begin to notice your calm, your consistency, your restraint, the emotional stability they no longer have access to. And slowly, memory turns into longing. A truth few men accept. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who benefit from your explanations are rarely the ones who deserve them. Those who truly valued you never needed constant clarification. Those who didn't value you used your explanations as leverage. Silence protects your energy. And a man who protects his energy becomes unforgettable. Closing thought for part 1. Silence is not emptiness. It is a statement that says, I chose peace over chaos. I chose self-respect over validation. I chose to walk away, not because I didn't care, but because I cared enough to stop bleeding. And that choice is what stays with them long after you're gone. Love is not only about happy moments, but also about challenges that help us realize our inner strength. It is through difficulties that we learn patience, tolerance, and how to love without losing ourselves. This is also the reason why I share stories here, so that you can find calmness and wisdom in your journey of love. If you feel these words touch you, please take a second to click like to spread this message. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click subscribe with the notification bell, to always be the first to receive new shares. Don't forget to leave a comment below, share your feelings or a lesson. Part 2, How Silence Plants Doubt, Regret, and Emotional Attachment Over Time. When you leave quietly, something subtle but powerful begins to happen. At first, they feel relief. No confrontation. No heavy conversation. No emotional pressure. They tell themselves it was mutual. That it wasn't serious. That they're fine. But silence doesn't work immediately. It works slowly. Like water seeping into cracks, it reaches places words never could. The first stage, comfort. In the beginning, silence feels easy for them. No guilt is triggered because you didn't accuse. No defense mechanisms are activated because you didn't attack. No responsibility is demanded because you didn't ask for answers. They assume. If it mattered, he would have said something. This is where most people misunderstand silence. They think it means you didn't care. And for a short time, that belief comforts them. The second stage, curiosity. Then something changes. Days pass. Then weeks. And you don't return. No late-night message. No emotional check-in. No attempt to clear the air. That's when curiosity begins. They start to wonder. Why didn't he fight for this? Why didn't he explain himself? Why was it so easy for him to walk away? Silence disrupts expectations. They expected you to react emotionally, most people do. They expected drama, pleading, or at least resentment. Your absence doesn't match the story they told themselves. And when reality doesn't match the narrative, doubt enters. The third stage, self-questioning. This is where silence becomes heavy. They replay moments they once dismissed. The times you stayed calm instead of arguing. The boundaries you held without raising your voice. The respect you demanded without asking for it. They begin to notice patterns, not in you, but in themselves. Silence turns the mirror inward. Without your words to deflect blame, they are left alone with their own thoughts. And self-reflection is far more uncomfortable than confrontation. Why silence forces accountability? When someone leaves loudly, blame is easy. He was dramatic. She overreacted. It was toxic anyway. Noise creates an excuse. But silence removes all distractions. There's no argument to win. No villain to point at. No emotional chaos to hide behind. Just a simple truth. Someone walked away, calmly. And calm departures suggest clarity. Clarity suggests awareness. And awareness makes people wonder what you saw that they didn't. The Stoic principle at work. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control others, only ourselves. Silence is the ultimate application of this principle. You don't try to convince. You don't seek validation. You don't force understanding. You act according to your values and let reality teach the lesson. And reality is a far better teacher than emotion. The fourth stage, emotional weight. Over time, silence gains mass. They begin to feel it in small moments. When something good happens and you're not there to share it. When something goes wrong and you're no longer their emotional anchor. When they realize no one replaced your presence the way they expected. Absence becomes noticeable. Not because you demanded importance. But because your consistency is gone. This is when nostalgia begins to distort memory. They don't remember the disagreements anymore. They remember how grounded you were. How stable. How you didn't chase, pressure, or collapse emotionally. Silence reframes your image. Why silence creates emotional attachment? Attachment is not formed through intensity alone. It's formed through contrast. When you leave quietly, you create a sharp contrast between life with you and life without you. No emotional explosion marks the transition. Just a gradual realization that something meaningful is missing. And the mind fills gaps with idealized memories. A hard truth for men. Here's what many men struggle to accept. You don't become unforgettable by explaining your worth. You become unforgettable by living it, and removing access to it. Silence says, I know my value. I don't need to negotiate it. And that unspoken confidence lingers far longer than words ever could. Why silence hurts the ego? Egos feed on reaction. They want anger. They want sadness. They want proof that they mattered. Silence starves the ego. No emotional reward. No confirmation. No reassurance. Just unanswered questions. And unanswered questions are where regret grows. Closing thought for part 2. Silence doesn't scream. It waits. It allows time to reveal what words would have ruined. And in that waiting, people begin to feel what they refused to acknowledge when you were still there. Not because you demanded it, but because you left with dignity. Part 3, Why Chasing Closure Destroys Attraction, and Silence Preserves Masculine Strength. There is a moment after separation when a man feels an almost irresistible urge to explain himself. To clarify. To justify. To be understood. This urge doesn't come from love. It comes from discomfort. And how you handle that discomfort determines whether you leave with strength, or with regret. The trap of chasing closure. Most men believe closure will bring peace. They think, if I just say this one last thing, I'll feel better. But what they're really seeking is relief from uncertainty. They want to unload emotional weight onto the other person, to make sense of pain by turning it into words. The problem is this. The moment you chase closure, you place your emotional state in someone else's hands. You say, without realizing it, my peace depends on your understanding. And that is the fastest way to lose both dignity and attraction. Why explanations lower your value. Attraction is rooted in emotional self-sufficiency. The more you explain yourself, the more you appear invested in their approval. Every extra message says, please see me. Please validate my feelings. Please confirm that I mattered. Even if your words are calm, the act itself communicates need. And need erodes masculine presence. Silence, on the other hand, communicates wholeness. It says, I don't require agreement to stand by my decision. Stoic masculinity is internal authority. Stoicism teaches that your worth is not negotiated externally. A Stoic man doesn't argue his value. He lives in alignment with it. When you walk away quietly, you demonstrate internal authority. You don't ask, do you understand why I left? Do you think I'm right? Do you still respect me? You already answered those questions for yourself. That certainty is deeply attractive, even to those who lost access to it. Why silence maintains emotional gravity. Words release tension. Silence retains it. When you explain, you deflate emotional pressure. When you argue, you exhaust it. When you beg, you destroy it. But when you leave without explanation, emotional gravity remains. They continue to feel the weight of your absence without relief. Not because you wanted them to suffer, but because you refuse to cheapen your presence by over-explaining it. The masculine error of overcommunication. Modern men are taught that emotional transparency is always healthy. But there is a difference between honesty and emotional leakage. Not every truth needs to be spoken. Not every feeling needs an audience. Not every ending requires narration. Stoic restraint is not emotional suppression. It is emotional mastery. You choose silence not because you have nothing to say, but because saying more would serve your ego, not your integrity. Why silence feels like strength to the other person. People sense emotional independence instinctively. When you stop talking, stop chasing, stop explaining, they feel it. Silence suggests control, stability, self-respect, emotional depth. And depth without access creates intrigue. They begin to wonder. What is he thinking? How did he detach so cleanly? Did I underestimate his strength? Silence reframes you from someone who needed me to someone who chose himself. The difference between coldness and clarity. Let's be precise. Silence is not coldness. Coldness is avoidance fueled by fear. Silence is clarity fueled by self-respect. You are not disappearing to provoke a reaction. You are withdrawing because continuing to engage would compromise your standards. This distinction matters, because people feel it. Silence rooted in dignity carries weight. Silence rooted in manipulation collapses quickly. Why chasing closure keeps you emotionally stuck. When you seek closure externally, you remain attached internally. You keep revisiting the past, rewriting conversations, replaying scenarios, waiting for emotional permission to move on. Silence cuts that cord. It forces you to create closure within yourself. And that internal closure is the only kind that lasts. A Stoic truth about respect. Respect is not granted when you explain yourself well. It is granted when you act in alignment with your values, even when it's uncomfortable. Walking away quietly says, I will not argue with reality. I will not chase what does not choose me. I will not sacrifice self-respect for emotional reassurance. That posture commands respect, whether or not it's immediately acknowledged. Closing thought for part 3. Closure is not something you receive. It is something you embody. And the man who leaves in silence carries something rare. Emotional discipline. That discipline doesn't just preserve attraction. It preserves identity. And identity is the foundation of all strength. At this point, you may have seen yourself in the stories above, sometimes weak, sometimes strong, and sometimes not knowing what to do in love. But it is those moments that make us real and worthy of respect. If you feel the same, please click like to let me know you are here, accompanying me. And if you haven't clicked subscribe yet, don't hesitate, because every day I will share more stories and new lessons, to help you have a calmer view of love. Now, let's move on to the final part, where we will touch on deeper things. Part 4. Why time amplifies silence, and regret grows when access is gone. Silence does not rush. It doesn't demand immediate understanding. It doesn't seek instant validation. Silence trusts time. And time, unlike emotion, reveals truth without bias. Why time works in favor of the silent man. When emotions are fresh, people protect their ego. They rationalize. They justify. They minimize. But as time passes, emotional defenses weaken. What once felt right begins to feel incomplete. The absence you created quietly starts to echo. Not because you reminded them, but because reality did. Immediate reactions versus long-term awareness. In the beginning, separation feels manageable. Life continues. Distractions exist. New stimuli soften the loss. But time strips distractions away. It exposes patterns. They begin to notice how rarely they felt grounded after you left. How unstable new connections feel by comparison. How peace is harder to find without your presence. Silence allows this comparison to happen naturally. No persuasion required. Why regret needs distance to form. Regret is not immediate. Regret requires perspective. When you were available, your value was familiar, and familiarity breeds blindness. Distance creates contrast. And contrast reveals worth. The more time passes without access to you, the clearer the loss becomes. Stoic detachment is strategic, not cruel. Stoicism does not teach emotional cruelty. It teaches emotional clarity. Detachment is not about punishing others. It is about protecting yourself from repeated self-betrayal. By staying silent, you refuse to reopen wounds that were never respected. You let time do what words cannot. Why silence prevents narrative manipulation. When you speak, others rewrite your words. When you argue, they distort your intent. But silence cannot be twisted. It stands as a constant. And that constancy forces people to confront facts instead of stories. Fact. You left. You did not return. You did not plead. That reality becomes heavier with time. Access is the currency people miss most. People rarely miss your words. They miss access. Access to your presence. Access to your emotional stability. Access to how you made them feel safe without needing reassurance. Silence removes access completely. And once access is gone, memory does the rest. Why time turns silence into meaning. At first, silence is interpreted as indifference. Later, it's interpreted as strength. Finally, it's understood as self-respect. That progression cannot be forced. It must be discovered. And time is the only thing patient enough to teach it. The pain of realization. There comes a moment, often unexpected, when the realization hits. Not during loneliness. Not during weakness. But during normalcy. They think. He would have handled this calmly. He would have understood without judgment. He never needed to be loud to be present. That's when regret settles. Quietly. Permanently. A Stoic warning. Silence only works when it is honest. If you are silent but emotionally attached, time will not serve you. Stoic silence requires internal detachment. You must release the need for outcome. You must let go of hoping they'll realize. Silence is not a tactic. It is a position. Why silence leaves a permanent imprint. Words fade. Moments blur. But emotional absence leaves a mark. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was calm. And calm endings are the hardest to forget. Closing thought for part 4. Time does not soften silence. It sharpens it. And when access is gone long enough, understanding arrives. Often too late to change anything. Part 5, How to leave in silence without bitterness, and carry that strength forward. There is a final lesson silence teaches, and it has nothing to do with the other person. It teaches you who you become when no one is watching. Leaving quietly is not the end of a relationship. It is the beginning of a deeper relationship with yourself. The most important departure is internal. Many men believe walking away is about distance. It's not. It's about detachment. You can leave physically and still remain emotionally trapped, replaying conversations, seeking validation in memory, hoping time delivers justice. Stoic silence demands more. It requires you to walk away internally. To stop negotiating with the past. To stop proving your worth to someone who already made their choice. That is where real strength begins. Why bitterness weakens the silent exit. Bitterness keeps the connection alive. Anger ties you emotionally to the person who hurt you. Resentment gives them rent-free space in your mind. A Stoic man does not poison his future by clinging to justified rage. Not because he denies pain, but because he refuses to let pain define him. Silence without bitterness is freedom. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. This is where many men misunderstand Stoicism. Forgiveness does not mean reopening doors. It does not mean allowing access again. It means releasing emotional debt. You forgive not because they deserve peace, but because you do. And forgiveness happens quietly, without announcement. Just like your departure. Carrying silence forward with integrity. Stoic silence is not something you turn on and off. It becomes part of your character. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop arguing with people who misunderstand you. You stop chasing emotional reassurance. You become selective with your energy. And that selectiveness is felt immediately by those around you. Calm men command attention without asking for it. Why the silent man evolves faster. When you don't externalize pain, you process it deeply. You reflect. You refine. You rebuild. Silence gives you space to ask the only questions that matter. Where did I compromise my values? What patterns do I need to break? How do I show up stronger next time? Growth happens in quiet rooms. Not in emotional debates. The paradox of being remembered. Here is the irony most people never understand. The moment you stop caring whether you're remembered, you become unforgettable. Because you no longer act for effect. You act from alignment. And alignment is rare. People remember intensity. But they feel stability. And feelings last longer than memories. A Stoic man's final responsibility. You are not responsible for how others process your absence. You are responsible for how you carry yourself after it. Do you become bitter? Do you become loud? Do you become desperate to be seen? Or do you become composed, grounded, and internally free? Silence gives you that choice. What silence ultimately says? Not to them, but to life itself. It says, I will not beg for respect. I will not explain my boundaries. I will not trade inner peace for temporary comfort. That posture reshapes your future relationships. You attract differently. You choose differently. You walk away sooner, and with less damage. The end is not an ending. Leaving in silence is not a tactic. It is a declaration of self-mastery. You didn't leave to be remembered. You left to remain whole. And if they remember you with regret, that is not your burden to carry. Your work was to leave with dignity. And you did. Final thought. Silence is not what you leave behind. It is what you take with you. A quiet strength. A steady presence. A man who no longer needs noise to prove his worth. And that is the most powerful ending of all. Conclusion. Leaving in silence is not about disappearing from someone's life. It is about returning to your own. In a world that rewards noise, explanation, and emotional exposure, silence feels unnatural. But for the man who has lived, lost, and learned, silence becomes clarity. You don't walk away quietly because you had nothing to say. You walk away because you said enough, and your words were no longer respected. Silence is not weakness. It is restraint. It is the strength to choose dignity over reaction, self-respect over validation, peace over emotional chaos. When you leave without forcing understanding, you allow time to reveal truth. You allow absence to speak. And absence, when carried with integrity, says more than any argument ever could. The person you left behind may eventually understand. Or they may not. But that outcome is no longer your responsibility. A Stoic man does not measure his worth by how deeply he is missed, but by how aligned he remains with his values after he leaves. Walking away in silence does not guarantee regret in others, and that was never the goal. What it guarantees is something far more important. Freedom from self-betrayal. You didn't leave to be remembered. You left to remain whole. And if your quiet absence lingers in someone's mind long after you're gone, that is not because you demanded attention, but because you carried yourself with calm strength. In the end, silence is not an ending. It is the sound of a man choosing himself, and moving forward without needing to be understood. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. Hopefully the sharing about love and lessons from this video will help you have new thoughts and find empathy. If you find the video useful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and share with those around you. Each of us has our own stories about love, and I'm happy to explore them with you. See you in the next videos. Wishing you a wonderful day filled with love.